Among all of the evils committed by the Third Reich, we often lose sight of one particularly odd, condemnable act committed by the Nazi regime. It would be safe to say that the German tactic for World War II could be described by one word: speed. This, of course, could directly refer to the infamous Blitzkrieg strategy that Germany debuted at the very start of the war and used all throughout the first years of the conflict. The entire purpose of the Lightning War was to launch a quick and strong offensive, breaking through enemy lines and overwhelming them before much of a counterattack could be launched. Speed was the foundation of this tactic, and therefore of the German war approach. But the word speed can be used to describe the Nazi World War II experience for an additional reason: drugs. Methamphetamine, a drug often nicknamed speed to be specific. The Germans' relationship with this drug during the Second World War is actually quite significant. Prior to the outbreak of the war, when the Nazis first rose to power, any type of hard drug became heavily rebuked by the authorities and was aggressively deemed a sign of personal weakness and something that could negatively impact the nation's image. This was in growing response to the growing number of German citizens who had been increasingly utilizing hard drugs to cope with the humiliating loss in World War I. Cocaine was often the drug of choice, and according to an American author who lived in Berlin during these interwar years, poverty-stricken boys and girls of good German families sold it and took it, all throughout the dire nation. Despite a 1924 ban on this particular upper, its peak actually didn't even hit until a few years later, as people continued to use and abuse it with no regard. Things got so bad that in the 1920s, it was Germany that controlled roughly 80% of the global cocaine market. And this wasn't even the only drug of choice throughout its borders. At this same time, Germany also accounted for about 40% of the world's morphine production, and many veterans or civilians wanting to escape the depression and despair of their contemporary world in a calmer way would take this easily obtainable pharmaceutical. In the following decade, some drug use in Germany did begin to decrease under the new Nazi regime, but it was more of a shift than a termination. Though cocaine users were now considered to be deplorable disgraces to the German nation, one chemist by the name of Friedrich Hauschild was not so convinced that all drugs were bad. You see, Hauschild had heard about the Americans utilizing a drug called benzodrine, an amphetamine, during the 1936 Olympic Games, and began to wonder if he could create something similar for the Germans. Working for Werke at the time, Hauschild began to experiment until he was able to synthesize methamphetamine, which Werke quickly began producing under the name Pervitin the following year. This drug became popular at rapid speed and could easily be purchased without a prescription, while being promoted as a way for the perfect humans, in the eyes of the Chancellor, to go one step further and become superhuman. It didn't take long for the German authorities to realize the potential benefits of using this new upper on the battlefield either, as Dr. Otto F. Ranke, a German director of the Research Institute of Defense Physiology, stated after trying the drug himself. With Pervitin, you can go on working for 36 to 50 hours without feeling any noticeable fatigue. So by the 1938 occupation of Czechoslovakia, the medical officers of the German military were already dishing out Pervitin to their soldiers. From there, the use of the drug by German troops became more and more typical. This was especially helpful for the success of none other than the Blitzkrieg. At the start of World War II, this strategy led to the fall of Poland, Denmark, Norway, Holland, Belgium, and France. Doped up on meth, the Nazis were able to execute this lightning war tactic with superhuman ability that stunned and quickly defeated their enemies. In one case, the Germans managed to cross the Ardennes forest, which the Allies had believed to be unsurpassable to begin with, in only 11 days. They then marched on, sleepless for at least 3 nights, as ordered by General Heinz Guderian, all thanks to the power of Pervitin. Still, methamphetamine is not a harmless substance. While it benefited the German cause without a single doubt, it also soon was clear that the dangers posed by Pervitin could end up doing more harm than good. Despite a warning being given by the Reich Health Führer, Leo Conti, back in 1939, the drug continued to be used and led to many troops suffering from severe side effects. During the battles in France alone, multiple servicemen suffered heart attacks after taking Pervitin, and others had more mild adverse reactions. Eventually, around the start of 1941, the use of methamphetamine began to decline among the Nazis in response to the growing concerns over its effects on the health of its users, although it was still accepted on both the Eastern and Western fronts. While the Germans may have gone a bit overboard with the uppers during World War II, to such a degree that they were described by the Brits as heavily drugged, fearless, and berserk, they weren't the only troops to use drugs as a way to combat fatigue and other natural effects of the war. The Allies were known to use Benzedrine throughout their battles as well, just not so aggressively as the Germans with their Pervitin. This can be seen in the reactions of the Allies at the French border and elsewhere, who were completely shocked and dumbfounded at the abilities of the Nazis and repeatedly failed to keep up with their enemies for this reason. Churchill himself even said, "I admit, it was one of the greatest surprises I have had in my life." So the answer to, were some members of the National Socialist Party, together with some soldiers and officers, on drugs in World War II? The answer is yes. The Nazis were heavily doped up for the first portion of the war, and while the usage did begin to decrease throughout 1941, it did not fully cease. And though, yes, the Germans were not the only troops using pharmaceuticals throughout the war.